Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Our today's topic is the humerus. The humerus is the bone of arm. It is the longest and the strongest bone of the upper limb. The parts of the humerus are as follows. The humerus, as we said, is a long bone and it consists of three parts: the upper end, the lower end, and the shaft. The upper end presents the following features: head, neck, the greater tubercle, the lesser tubercle, and the intertubercular sulcus. The head is smooth and rounded and forms less than half of a sphere. It is directed medially, backwards, and upwards. The head articulates with the glenoid cavity of the scapula to form the glenohumeral joint or the shoulder joint. The lower end presents the following features: the capitulum, which is a lateral, rounded, convex projection; the trochlea, which is a medial, pulley-shaped structure; the radial fossa, which is a small fossa above the capitulum; the coronoid fossa, which is another small fossa above the trochlea; the medial epicondyle, which is a prominent projection on the medial side; the lateral epicondyle, which is another prominent projection on the lateral side, but it is less prominent as compared to the medial side. The olecranon fossa is a large, deep, hollow fossa on the posterior aspect of the lower end of the humerus. The shaft of the humerus is the part of the bone that extends between the upper end and the lower end. It is cylindrical in shape in the upper half but triangular in cross section in the lower half. We'll come to this a little bit later.
Let's now see the anatomical position and the side determination of humerus. The side of the humerus can be determined by holding it vertically in such a way that the rounded head at the upper end faces medially, backwards and upwards. The lesser tubercle, the greater tubercle, and the vertical groove, that is the intertubercular groove or sulcus, at the upper end faces anteriorly. In the lower end, the olecranon fossa should be facing posteriorly. Keeping all these points in mind, we can see that this humerus is of the left side. Now, if we see the features and attachments of the upper end, we can see that the head is smooth, rounded, and it forms the 1/3 of a sphere. It is covered with articular hyaline cartilage and which is thicker in the center in compared to the periphery. Coming to the neck, the humerus has got three necks. The anatomical neck is a constriction at the margin of the rounded head, and it provides attachment to the capsular ligament of the shoulder joint, except superiorly where the capsule is deficient for the passage of tendon of long head of biceps brachii. Medially, the capsule extends down from the anatomical neck to the shaft for about 1 to 2 centimeter. If you look at the surgical neck, it is short constriction in the upper end of the shaft below the greater and the lesser tubercles and below the epiphyseal line. It is related to the axillary nerve and posterior and anterior circumflex humeral vessels. So the surgical neck is one of the most important feature of the proximal end of the humerus because it is weaker than more proximal regions of the bone. Hence, it is the common site where there is fracture. Coming to the morphological neck, it is the junction between the diaphysis and the epiphysis. It is represented by an epiphyseal line in the adult bone. It is in fact a true junction of the head with the shaft.
Let us talk about the greater tubercle. The greater tubercle is the most lateral part in the proximal end of the humerus or the upper end of the humerus. Its posterior superior aspect bears three flattened facet-like impressions which gives attachment to the supraspinatus, the infraspinatus and the teres minor muscles respectively. The lesser tubercle is a small elevation on the anterior aspect of the upper end of humerus just above the surgical neck. This provides attachment to the subscapularis muscle. Between the greater tubercle and the lesser tubercle, we have the intertubercular sulcus, also called the bicipital groove. The bicipital groove consists of the long head of biceps that is enclosed by a synovial sheath. The long head of biceps is also accompanied by the ascending branch of the anterior circumflex humeral artery. The bicipital groove consists of a lateral lip, a medial lip and a floor. The muscles attached to this region are the pectoralis major muscle is attached to the lateral lip of the groove. The teres major muscle is attached to the medial lip of the groove, while the latissimus dorsi muscle is attached to the floor of the groove.
Now, if we see the shaft of the humerus, we can see that the upper end of the shaft is cylindrical and its lower part is triangular on cross section. The shaft has got three borders and three surfaces. Coming to the border, firstly the anterior border. The anterior border starts from the lateral lip of the intertubercular sulcus and extends down to the anterior margin of the deltoid tuberosity and becomes smooth and rounded in the lower half where it ends in the radial fossa. The medial border extends from the medial lip of the intertubercular sulcus down to the medial epicondyle. Its lower part is sharp and is called the medial supracondylar ridge. This ridge provides attachment to the medial intermuscular septum. A rough strip on the middle of this border provides insertion to the coracobrachialis muscle. A narrow area above the medial epicondyle provides origin to the humeral head of pronator teres muscle. Moving on to the lateral border, its upper part is indistinct while its lower part is prominent where it forms the lateral supracondylar ridge. Above the lateral supracondylar ridge, it is ill-defined but traceable to the posterior part of the greater tubercle. About in the middle, the lateral border is crossed by the radial groove from behind. The lower part of this border, the lateral supracondylar ridge, provides attachment to the lateral intermuscular septum.
So now that we have defined the borders, let's talk about the surfaces. First, the anterolateral surface. The anterolateral surface is the surface between the anterior border and the lateral border. A little above the middle, the anterolateral surface presents a characteristic V-shaped tuberosity. This is called the deltoid tuberosity and it provides insertion to the deltoid muscle. The anteromedial surface lies between the anterior border and the medial border. In the upper part, this surface forms the floor of the intertubercular sulcus. We have already talked about the intertubercular sulcus or the bicipital groove. In the middle and close to the medial border, it presents a nutrient foramen which is directed downwards. Now, since the nutrient artery is directed towards the elbow, this means that the upper end of the bone is the growing end. To understand more about the relation between the nutrient artery and the growing end of the bone, you can go back and watch our previous videos, the general anatomy of bone and ossification of bones. Now, in the lower part of the humerus, both anterolateral and the anteromedial surface together with the anterior border gives origin to the brachialis muscle. Let's talk about the posterior surface. The posterior surface of the bone lies between the medial border and the lateral border. In the upper one-third of this surface, there is an oblique ridge which is directed downwards and laterally. This ridge provides origin to the lateral head of the triceps brachii. Below and medial to this ridge is the radial groove or the spiral groove. This lodges the radial nerve and the profunda brachii vessels. The entire posterior surface below the spiral groove provides origin to the medial head of the triceps brachii.
Coming to the lower end is flattened from before backwards and expanded from side to side. The capitulum, that is the rounded convex projection which is coming from the lateral aspect, articulates with the head of the radius. The trochlea, or a pulley-shaped projection from the medial aspect, articulates with the trochlear notch of the ulna. The ulnar nerve is related to the posterior surface of the medial epicondyle. The anterior surface of the medial epicondyle provides an area for common flexor origin of the superficial flexor muscles of forearm. The anterolateral part of the lateral epicondyle provides an area for common extensor origin. The posterior surface of the lateral epicondyle gives origin to the anconeus muscle. The coronoid process of ulna fits into the coronoid fossa, that is the fossa which is lying above the trochlea, during full flexion of the elbow. The head of the radius fits into the radial fossa, a fossa just above the capitulum, during full flexion of the elbow. The olecranon process of ulna fits into the olecranon fossa that is present on the posterior aspect above the trochlea during full extension of the elbow. The capsule of the elbow joint is attached above the coronoid and the radial fossa anteriorly and above the olecranon fossa posteriorly.
Let us talk about the ossification of the humerus. The humerus is ossified by the following ossification centers: one primary center for the shaft, three secondary centers for the upper end, and four secondary centers for the lower end. The primary center for the shaft appears at 8 weeks of intrauterine life. For the upper end, one secondary center appears for the head during the first year of postnatal life. One secondary center appears for the greater tubercle during the third year. One secondary center appears for the lesser tubercle during the fifth year. Now these three secondary centers of ossification for the upper end fuse together at 7 years of age to form the conjoined upper epiphysis. This epiphysis fuses with the shaft in 20 years of age. In the lower end, one secondary center appears in the capitulum at 2 years of age. One secondary center appears in the trochlea at 10 years of age. Another secondary center appears at the lateral epicondyle during 12 years of age. These three secondary centers fuse with each other at 14 years of age to form most of the lower epiphysis, and they join with the shaft at 16 to 17 years of age. Another secondary ossification center appears for the medial epicondyle at 6 years of age, and this fuses with the rest of the bone at 18 years of age. Recall that the rest of the lower end fuses with the shaft at 16 to 17 years of age. This separate ossification center for the medial epicondyle, which fuses with the shaft only at 18 years of age, may be mistaken for a fracture in X-rays. So this is one applied importance of the ossification of the humerus. And that's all for today. Stay tuned to Anatomy Weekly. Keep watching, keep learning. We'll see you next time. Thank you.